Have you ever wondered how one of the most powerful and glamorous nations in Europe, ruled by an absolute monarch, could just suddenly collapse into a decade of chaos, terror, and war? All in the name of liberty, no less? Well, let's dive into one of the most pivotal and violent transformations in all of world history. So this is the big question we're going to tackle. We're going to look at what lit the fuse, what happened during the explosion, and what the world looked like after all the smoke finally cleared. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in 18th century France. Now, on the surface, this place is the cultural capital of Europe. It's all about glamour, philosophy, art. But right underneath that glittering facade, the whole country was basically a powder keg, just waiting to explode, built on a system of just profound inequality. At the very heart of the problem was France's super rigid social structure. See, society was split into three classes, or estates. First, you had the clergy and the nobility. Together, they made up a tiny 3% of the population. And then you had literally everyone else, the third estate, a massive 97% of the entire nation. And this is where the injustice becomes absolutely staggering. That tiny minority, the first and second estates, they owned 30% of all the land, but paid almost nothing in taxes. Meanwhile, the 97%, we're talking everyone from poor peasants to the educated middle class, they were being crushed, paying up to half their income to the government. This wasn't just unfair, the whole system was set up to keep the vast majority of people powerless and poor. And on top of all that social tension, you had this perfect storm of other problems brewing. You've got these radical new ideas about liberty and rights spreading from the Enlightenment. You've got the recent American Revolution proving that, hey, you actually can overthrow a king. And to top it all off, the French government was drowning in debt while its people were unemployed and literally starving. The pressure was building to a breaking point. Well, that pressure had to go somewhere, right? This brings us to the moment it all boils over. The moment the people decided they'd had enough and started to take power into their own hands. That breaking point came at this big meeting called the Estates General. The king called it, hoping to solve the debt crisis. But here's the catch. The voting system was completely rigged. Each of the three estates got only one vote. That meant the clergy and nobility could always just team up and outvote the third estate 2-1. The voice of 97% of France was officially worthless, and that was the final straw. So what did they do? In an incredible act of defiance, the Third Estate just walked out. They declared themselves the National Assembly, essentially saying, forget the king, we are the true representatives of the French people. This was it, the first real organized step of the revolution. And they didn't waste any time. They quickly laid out their new vision for France in a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. This thing was a bombshell. Just listen to this line. Men are born free and equal in rights. A sentence like that was designed to completely erase centuries of tradition and hierarchy, replacing it with these radical new ideals of liberty and equality. And things moved incredibly fast in 1789. I mean, in May, you have that disastrous Estates General meeting. By June, the new National Assembly is taking the tennis court oath, vowing to write a whole new constitution. And then, by July, rumors are flying that the king is sending his army to crush them. So the people of Paris storm the Bastille prison looking for weapons. This violent attack really became the symbolic start of the whole revolution. But this dream of liberty, it quickly spiraled into a nightmare. As foreign countries declared war on this new France and internal enemies threatened to undo everything, a deep paranoia took hold. The next phase of the revolution wasn't going to be defined by enlightened ideals, but by chaos and by blood. And this was the point of no return. The revolutionaries didn't want to just limit the king's power anymore. Now they wanted to erase the monarchy completely. In 1793, King Louis XVI was put on trial for treason and publicly executed by the guillotine. The old France was officially dead. With the king gone, a power vacuum opened up, and radical leaders like this guy, Maximilien Robespierre, seized control. Consumed by fear of enemies, both outside and inside France, they unleashed a period of brutal repression that we now call the Reign of Terror. It was a time when even the slightest suspicion of being disloyal could get you sent to the guillotine. And the human cost was just horrifying. In just over a year, an estimated 40,000 people were executed. The revolution, which started with this beautiful call for the rights of man, was now literally devouring its own children. The terror only ended when its own architect, Robespierre, was turned on by his allies and sent to the guillotine himself. So after the sheer bloodletting of the terror, France was just exhausted. It was unstable. This created a massive power vacuum. And you know what they say about power vacuums, right? Someone is always going to step in to fill it. So let's take stock. After 10 years of revolution, where was France? Well, by 1799, the government was corrupt and totally ineffective, the economy was an absolute mess, and the nation was still at war with its neighbors. The people were desperate for some kind of stability and for a strong leader to finally provide it. And that leader was Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a brilliant, incredibly ambitious military general, and he saw his chance. In 1799, he launched a coup d'état. That's a swift, military-led overthrow of the government and seized power for himself. He promised order, and he delivered it. But in doing so, he pretty much ended the whole democratic experiment of the French Revolution. Which brings us to the ultimate irony of this entire story. France started a revolution to destroy an absolute monarchy, only to end it by creating an emperor who was, in many ways, even more powerful. It leaves all of us with a really difficult question. What is the true price of radical change, and is it always worth the cost?